Well, I'd like to make an or pose or make an argument that certainly the pursuit of oil has drawn us into Iraq. I mean, just going back to this question of, why should Americans be concerned about these issues? And certainly it seems that if the United States is kind of running around trying to secure oil supplies in this old energy economy, that's really gets into all the domestic budgetary priorities we've been talking about, the infrastructure issues and that sort of thing. And so that's certainly something to throw out and try and engage the American public on.
The energy question is one of the major issues related to both security as well as climate change, and involves not only use of oil and gasoline and jet fuel for transportation purposes in a variety of ways, air, land, and sea, but also certainly production of electricity, both residential and commercial. And I think until we have a new paradigm, if we want to continue to use that good term, I think, and we get away from fossil fuel, and we get away from nuclear power, we can talk about nuclear issues too a lot more, and more towards sustainable, renewable energy, so that we have long-term, independence basically for everybody globally. It's going to continue to be a problem, and will only be exacerbated, I think, as these supplies deteriorate, and particularly if we go towards nuclear more and more, in which case we have no idea as to what to do with the radioactive waste from nuclear power plants. We continue to proliferate spent fuel pools vulnerable to terrorist attack and theft and diversion and use in dirty bombs around the globe. This will only continue to, in fact, hurt things badly. The other thing I would mention with regard to security is the military is the biggest organization globally, the U.S. military, that uses fossil fuels, and therefore produces probably the most carbon emissions, depending on how you judge. But the use of jet fuel and naval fuel and diesel fuel globally in the U.S. military is so enormous. The big issue in warfare too, it's a practical issue as well, because the big issue in warfare is that your most vulnerable point of attack in a battlefield, for example, in Iraq, or in '91 when we were moving up into Iraq from Kuwait, was in fact the fuel tankers. And so military people themselves will state that they wish they could somehow find some sustainable use of energy, sustainable energy source, so they could wean themselves back from the fuel, the fossil fuel tail that the troops always have to rely on, and it's the most vulnerable point. A tank doesn't go more than 50 miles. It gets 6 gallons to the mile, more or less, in an M1 tank.
Right, and I guess
of jet fuel. It's a turbine engine, so it's a big issue. I think has to be addressed.
Let me ask maybe Brent or Paul or Elizabeth, you can answer this question. Can a clean, sustainable energy economy replace the fossil fuel economy without nuclear as well? A lot of people doubt that's possible.
There are a number of reports out showing how you could do that. One book by Arjun Makhijani, Carbon-Free, Nuclear-Free by 2050, illustrates a path in which you can get there. So that is one possibility. Lester Brown describes another route to go. Each of these are different approaches, but the problem is not one of a technological barrier, but rather it's an institutional barrier. The powers that be that run the fossil fuel economy do not want to give up their control of the U.S. government or other governments.
and economy.
And that means they're running the global economy, because how is the global economy fueled? It's fueled today by fossil fuels. And they realize that dispersed energy combined with efficiency gets you really right past all of the problems.
When you say dispersed energy,
I'm talking about wind power, solar power. You can have concentrated solar, you can have solar panels, you can have wind, geothermal, and you combine that with cogeneration and other storage mechanisms, and suddenly you deal with intermittency problems of solar and wind. And just one figure Makhijani came up with in his book was, if we simply put solar collectors above the automobiles and outdoor parking lots and rooftop parking lots, you generate more electricity than the U.S. uses. So one of the things that we want to do is let's put those over the Pentagon parking lots as a starter and let them generate electricity, shield the cars from the hot summer sun, and we'll actually begin the transformation of the Pentagon into a clean energy operation there. Huh?
I guess you can see that beginning to happen in a country like Germany, where they have given tax credits, tax advantages to people who produce solar, and they're talking now
Solar
about
panels on every
solar
shed
panels
in
wherever
their
they can put
backyards.
them so they get their tax break. And so it's a very dispersed production of solar. And you also see in Germany, they're talking now about closing down nuclear energy
And coal.
sources.
And coal.
Not just talking, they're doing it.
They're doing it, and as there are a couple other countries in Europe. So, I mean, I guess there are some countries that are going that route and showing it can actually work. But a lot of people in the United States don't believe it's possible. I know a lot of enlightened people in the United States who are pretty smart and follow things very closely, who just don't believe it's possible to go to a sustainable energy.
I don't think it's fair to say that it's not possible when we haven't even tried. I mean, if you look at where the money's going, or subsidies are going primarily to fossil fuels, when they're not going to fossil fuels, the things that they call clean energy and, you know, put in research and development into clean energy, it is mostly going to nuclear power. And if you look at even the cost comparisons between energy efficiency, which is something like 2 cents per kilowatt hour, and coal, which is 4 cents per kilowatt hour, we should be investing so much money right now in energy efficiency because it's cheap. It's the cheapest way to reduce emissions. It's the cheapest way to reduce our energy use, and we're just not doing it. So I think, the response would be, well, you know, if you actually do change where our money's going and put it into the right things, that's something that's completely possible.
You know, also, I look at that from, I live in Baltimore, Maryland, and in Baltimore we have 30,000 abandoned homes that are boarded up and not used. And I look at surrounding Baltimore, there's overpriced housing everywhere. And I look at that and I say, wow, wouldn't it be amazing if we did make this paradigm shift, started to invest in dispersed energy with efficiency and solar and geothermal for individual homes. You could turn those 30,000 homes into energy-producing, energy-efficient places that create jobs at the same time, deal with that urban underclass that seems impossible to solve, but it actually is solvable. And so by creating this new economy, you actually end up having a lot of positive domino effects that lead to all sorts of rejuvenation. And also, you know, if you take that kind of approach and start to retrofit homes that exist, because this is true throughout the country, it's not just Baltimore. You start to retrofit homes that already exist, you also start to have a dent on the whole sprawl mentality of, you know, this kind of road-based living style that becomes, you know, passé if you have this kind of more livable urban community.